The following Predator Watch podcast is sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. What would it be like for a wife to realize that her husband was hiding a secret? Hiding a secret not out of shame, but out of a desire to use her as convenient cover, to hypocritically use her to appear like an upstanding Christian husband and father in order to improve his image in the community for his own business purposes. What would it be like for this wife to find out that her trusted husband was actually into very deviant porn and had gotten into cross-dressing with other porn-saturated men? Tracy Shannon was married to just such a man, who turned out to be nothing more than a deviant deceiver, who took her for all she was worth to craft an upstanding public image for his own business purposes, to get her to the altar, all the while never disclosing how much porn and deviance he was really into. And in fact, behind her back, to his deviant, porn-saturated lovers, he would mock her for trusting him. He would make sport of the mother of his children for actually believing his lies, as he would gaslight her and manipulate her for his own deviant ends.
I would eventually find emails and chats between him and this woman. I think it was a woman. It could have been a man who was identifying as a woman, but where they talked about me and where he bragged about how he had deceived me, and he would laugh about it. In the chats, he would actually type out heh heh heh. So there was no feeling bad for what he was putting me through. In fact, he would even laugh about that he was tricking me to stay with him longer. I never would have expected the way he acted towards me, but once it came down to when he was decided that this is what he's going to do, it was a whole different person I was dealing with. It is not I never would have thought he would hurt me the way he did, that he would have treated me the way he did. While, even as we were going through the divorce, I was continuously shocked by just the way he basically put me out on the curb with the kids like we were trash.
We'll hear the continuation of Tracy's compelling story on Survivor Support's Predator Watch podcast.
Predator Watch provides a brief overview of important stories in the news or issues of concern as they relate to understanding the nature of sexual predators, their characteristics, how their minds operate, their methods of manipulation, and what motivates them. They hide in plain sight, can smell an opportunity a mile away, and count on people not understanding just how dark their hearts are and how intent they are about always producing victims. Stay tuned as John Euler, a licensed professional counselor with over 25 years of professional experience treating both survivors and sexual predators, shares his insights on this edition of Predator Watch.
Hi, and I'm John Euler, and you're listening to the Predator Watch podcast. Well, welcome back to the Survivor Support's Predator Watch podcast. We're picking up the interview I had with Tracy Shannon, where we left off last time, as she started to unfold her story of being married to a man that she thought was the love of her life and a good, upstanding Christian guy. But she slowly began to realize as the years unfolded that there was a very different side to this man, and it wasn't out of brokenness. It started to become clear that she had married a very deviant man, a man that had another side to him. And that is what's so important about, or among other things, what's so important about this story, because there's certain groups out there that would want to take a story like this and invert it, have misplaced sympathies, and say, well, this poor guy was trying to find himself. No, the reality is, and as you listen to Tracy describe her story, the reality is she is the one that deserves our sympathy. She would not ask for that, but she's the one that needs our support, and women like her, because these porn-saturated, deviant men are masters of deception and masters of manipulation and manipulating the public narrative. So as we listen to Tracy's story, keep a listen out for how she describes this progression in revealing the extent of his deviance, her husband's. And he went so far as to find a deceptive therapist. Talk about conversion therapy. They tried to convert her, and they tried to make it seem like she was the one with the issue. So there's so many levels of deviance and so many levels of deception with men that are into porn. And if you are cross-dressing as a guy, trust me, you're into porn. So we rejoined the conversation with Tracy as she was beginning to help us understand what it was like being in a therapy session with her deceptive husband, who had arranged to have an equally deceptive therapist.
This would be the first time ever that anyone ever said to me anything about him wanting to be female, and he didn't say it. The therapist planted that seed. She said in front of him he would not know if he wanted to be male or female for 3 months. So that was shocking in a number of ways. First of all, I never heard that before. And second of all, oh, really? That's all it takes is 3 months to 3 months to decide you want to change sex for your life. And I'm married to him, and we had at the time 1 child. So I just said, if he doesn't know, then I have, there's no reason for me to be here. I have all the answers I need. And then he said, no, I didn't say that. She's putting words in my mouth. So we stayed a little longer at this therapist's office. And this is when I saw the teeth of this movement for the very first time. And this was a therapist who, as it turned out, is very active in the LGBTQ community and is a lesbian. But I did not know that at the time. And he had sought her out. So she went on to tell me that my husband could go out with these groups of men who get together, go out to eat, and all dressed up in drag. They meet somewhere, and everybody changes into, not drag, but they cross-dress, and they all go out to dinner together and have a nice time, and I would never have to see it. And so as long as I didn't have to see it, it should be all right with me. Can't he just do that? And he would get all the information about this little group, and also some magazines about, like ladies magazines, like Cosmopolitan or whatever, how to do makeup and ways to dress. He would get all those at a P.O. box, and plus the meetup newsletter things at a P.O. box. Why couldn't he just do that? That was her suggestion to save our marriage. And I said, no way. This is a problem in our marriage. It's robbing us of intimacy, and he's not doing that. And she said that, well, where did you go to college? And because you're very close-minded. And I said, well, we went to the same university, and it was a rather conservative university, as a matter of fact, at the time that I went there. Texas A&M University. And anyway, she then went on to say, well, you're probably a lesbian, and you just haven't figured that out yet, because you married someone who has this inner femininity to them. So, you are a lesbian, and you just haven't figured that out. So at this point,
yeah, we're told about how the therapists that are not a part of the lifestyle, or not inclined towards that, or not open to that, are the ones to place their values on people. But look at what just happened as you were describing that. I want to ask you, as you were starting to see the warning signs, one of the things that narcissistic people, they are masters at, are making a person feel crazy. Crazy making. Can you speak to that as you were trying to figure out what you're seeing and to make sense of it? What were some of the things that were starting to come together for you? And how would he, the term is flip the script, how would he make it seem you were reading into it, you were misreading it, all the while he is living a lie? Your intuition is telling you there's something up, but he's denying it or minimizing it. Walk us through that process, because there are women that are listening right now that are in the midst of that. And the narcissist or selfish person will always try to get the victim, as it were, to disengage their intuition. And without intuition, you can't test reality. You can't figure out what is up, what is down. It's your internal radar system of being able to tell whether or not somebody's taking advantage of you.
So if he would try to say it was about something else. So he would set up the scenario. He wanted to shave his legs, and it would be, he had multiple different reasons that he had brought up that he wanted to shave his legs. And this is before I even really knew it was cross-dressing going on, but I was uncomfortable with the leg shaving. This wasn't like a swimmer or serious bike rider guy. This is their average husband. And he kept having all these reasons. And one reason he gave, which was the one he finally really drilled down and said that this was, why he needed to shave his legs, was that he was working in the field, hand-augering wells, and he would get hot. He was an environmental engineer, and he would be working, and the jeans he was wearing, he said, were pulling on his leg hairs. That sounded really absurd to me, but he just kept nagging about it until finally he did go through with the shaving. And although he told me, it was about, it was nothing, it was about work, I felt it was more than that. And later my instincts would be proven right in that regard, but he would always minimize what he did. It was just a little, I did it because I was stressed. He never would, admit that there was anything to it that was arousing to him, but it always felt like a form of cheating to me. And that he wasn't turning towards our marriage for intimacy, but going towards dressing up and what he did to pleasure himself when he was in various phases of cross-dress. And but that's not what he was owning up to, although I would, slowly put all the pieces together on the cross-dressing front and what it was about, and there was arousal for him. There were those things where he would just say, well, I was stressed, it was something you did. He would blame me. Maybe I wasn't nice enough. Maybe I wasn't intimate with him enough. And whatever happened, it was my fault. And to this day, he still maintains I'm responsible for the divorce as well as his transition, because had I not even divorced him, he would not have even transitioned. But there was always this turning the tables, twisting the story, so that I felt like whatever I saw wasn't really what I saw. He would always have some excuse for it. And so, I would say it was always, it isn't what it looks like. It was what it looked like, but I always was believing him. Why did I always believe him? I believed him because I wanted to believe him. It took many years before I finally found a therapist that, told me, stop believing him. Stop going to him for all your answers. You need to look for your own answers. And this counselor, and this is what I would recommend, as it worked for me, is go to a counselor that works with men who lie and cheat and beat their wives. That is the only time I had really good, honest therapy. And I would say that in like 25 years of going to therapy for my children and myself and for my past marriage, that was the best therapist I ever saw. The most honest, the most intuitive, and the most effective, because he really actually was helping men who were abusing their wives to end that behavior and helping wives to walk out of those situations. And it was good that I met him, and he told me that I was dealing with someone who wasn't being honest. And he even met with my husband by himself and followed back up with me and said, he's not really willing to do the work. It's all lip service. And that is what I was getting in the marriage, was lip service. So, yeah.
Tracy, it reminds me of Proverbs 21:29. It says, the wicked bluff their way through, but the virtuous think before they're acting. That term bluff can mean also puts on a bold, unfeeling face, meaning skilled and professional liar.
Oh, yeah. My ex would easily lie when we were married because he had things to cover. He didn't, like myself. There were things that the consequences of divorce, we both stood to lose. So, of course, he hid things, and he was I don't know if I should say he was a good liar. He was an effective liar when it came to me, because a narcissist, and I believe that's what he is. I'm not saying that to be mean or vengeful, but narcissists study their victims when they're first getting to know them. When they're first getting to know their target, they find out what's important to them. And my ex definitely knew what was important to me, and he would use that, and he would use it to keep me under his spell and manipulate me. There was that.
And let me, if I might, Tracy, we may have, I don't want to say lost anyone, but those that are steeped in Christianese or Christian lingo, and I'm not minimizing that, but there's a teaching that says that divorce is never an option. Well, first of all, that's not biblical. We know what happened in the Old Testament. If someone says, well, that's the Old Testament, that's not the New, well, you still don't understand. Jesus only owned a copy of the Old Testament. The reason why he protected that one woman was because of the attitudes of the religious leaders. But it's important to understand that in the book of Proverbs, the book of Psalms, it lists all sorts of different types of people. Those are not just a random category of names. Those are actually categories. And so it's important for us to be able to discern the heart condition. Jesus himself said, do not cast your pearls before swine. Well, that presupposes we can figure out what a pig is. And so in Proverbs 22, verse 10, it says this, throw out the mocker, and it also says drive him out. Okay? Another word for mocker is a scoffer, and fighting or strife and contention goes out too. Quarrels and insults will disappear, that strife and abuse, they'll cease. Well, for someone to have morphed into a mocker or a scoffer, for those that haven't studied it, that is actually further down the slippery slope than a fool. And if the fool is said in his heart, there is no God. It doesn't mean he says it out loud. It just means he is king of his own castle. By the time somebody morphs into deviant stuff, they are already in a category that is pretty much fixed. There is a point of no return. And we think it might look dramatic. It doesn't have to look dramatic like the guy goes to prison. It simply means that on the inside, he is recalcitrant. He has been given over to very deviant stuff, ensconced in selfishness, and therefore he is past the point of no return as far as ever feeling sorry. And he feels very self-justified. And we are commanded, it's actually not a suggestion, in Proverbs 22:10, it says, throw him out. And so, Tracy, there you were trying to be a good wife. You're left trying to figure out what is going on with your marriage. You assumed you had the ideal white picket fence home. You mentioned that to me, and here you're trying to save your marriage. You're trying to work on it, and meanwhile, you don't know, but that he has no interest in this. He's getting in saving the marriage. He's getting worse. He actually found the therapist, which was a setup. So he found one that agreed with him and was going to actually try to convince you. Well, that's not therapy. There's a big push against quote-unquote conversion therapy, which is a misnomer, because that has a religious tone to it, and that means if you persuade somebody from going into the gay or even worse lifestyle, well, that's not what therapy is about. Therapy is about quote-unquote values clarification and helping someone figure out not just what they're doing, but why. Well, he found a therapist for you, or for the two of you, that really was going to try to change your mind and convince you that you were wrong and convince you that he was right. And so talk about the reverse of what Christians get blamed for.
Right. Well, that wasn't his, as it turns out, that wouldn't be his only attempt in our marriage to try to convert me. There were other attempts, some of them more subtle. But, that, as you were saying, that there's a, going towards mocking, and that's what happened towards the end. When I finally found out the truth of how big, and in my mind, this grew over time into a bigger and bigger problem the more he fed the beast. But, I would eventually find emails and chats between him and this woman. I think it was a woman. It could have been a man who was identifying as a woman, but where they talked about me and where he bragged about how he had deceived me, and he would laugh about it. In the chats, he would actually type out, heh, heh, heh. So there was no feeling bad for what he was putting me through. In fact, he would even laugh about, that he was tricking me to stay with him longer so that he could get me to move back to Texas because I was not living in Texas at the time. And because getting a divorce in Texas would be more beneficial to him, because there's not really very good alimony laws in Texas. So that was his goal, was to trick me. And trick me, once again, he did, because I was eager to believe my own fantasy. I mean, he had his fantasy of being a woman, and I had my fantasy, the white picket fence house, which we lived in, and the beautiful children, which we had, and just a perfect family. Something would happen or come up with us. Like one time, he had tried to pressure me to breastfeed one of our babies. And after I just had that baby, I was having some problems with nursing. And so I started getting messages from him in my email and stories about how these men in like third world countries would breastfeed. And he's like, I could help you. And I kind of thought he was kidding at first, but he pushed the issue a bit more. And finally, I just said, if you bring it up again, just don't ever bring it up again or we're getting a divorce. And so he never brought it up again. And I just, without missing a beat, went on with just burying myself in the care of the children. And because I didn't want to ever get divorced, and I wanted my family, my perfect family, the perfect image of a perfect family that we had. So there was that.
And you had mentioned, again, that along the way you saw different things, and so that people can really get a sense of how far down a man goes down this slippery slope by the time he's into this. You mentioned that he was going to strip clubs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. When we first were married, I was really surprised to find out, because this was a man who was a virgin until we were together, and I just didn't think that he would do something like that. He was shy and not an aggressive towards me at all when we were dating, and just was a gentleman when we were dating. And so I was surprised that he would even go to a strip club with some friends when I was out of town. I was had to spend a few days a week finishing up my coursework in college, because we got married while I was still in school, and while he was getting his master's in a different city and he was working. So I was really shocked and surprised that he would do that. And he was like, well, I didn't know they were going there. He would, make excuse that he wasn't really into it and not going to go again. But he knew it made me angry and I didn't understand it. But he continued to tell me about it the several times that it happened until they just didn't do it anymore. I really, later began to realize, why even tell someone you're doing something that is going to upset them? Why do you do that? I really felt that he was, again, trying to push the envelope, like he did a couple other times in our marriage. Like one instance, which I think a lot of women have experienced, is where he tried to influence me to allow him to cross-dress with me. And this is before I really even knew there was an issue with cross-dressing. But he was checking it out. He was testing the waters, pushing the envelope. Why don't I dress up as a woman? And he said, and we can do things in the bedroom with him dressed as a woman, and pretend we're lesbian lovers. And that was like a fantasy thing that he wanted to do with me. And I said, he had been pushing some other fantasy role play stuff that he had heard about from a book talked about on the radio show, he said. And so I really felt like those, when he was pushing those things, a lot of that was uncomfortable for me. A lot of it was really unnecessary to have enjoyable sex, and it was very scripted, and we actually didn't have a whole lot of money to buy all these props because we were both in college and we had one income. So it was really, when I later thought back on that, I thought not only was it weird for me at the time and uncomfortable, but I had an instinct it was wrong, but he would always just say, it was because he heard this on the radio. Oh, my friends said we were going to go to lunch. It ends up it's at a strip club. I mean, I really now realize he was pushing the envelope with me and seeing how far I would let things go, what I was willing to put up with. And, he would actually even at one point in our marriage, and I think there was more than one time where he tried to convince a third party, not even a therapist, but a person he met online, to befriend me inside of a video game that we played together. I don't think I shared this with you before, so this may be new, but we enjoyed a video game that we played together, and a lot of members of my family and some of our friends played it. Well, he had befriended someone in the game, a woman, and he was trying to convince her to convince me to allow him to cross-dress, because they got to talking, and well, it didn't work as he wanted. She ended up not talking to me and became really creeped out about him. But he actually told me about that, because how do I know now when he is telling me the truth? Because he did lie to me a lot when we were together. I know when he's telling me the truth by how shocking it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I want to add at this point for those that are listening, just to help encourage women that are wrestling with their intuition, because Tracy, as you've indicated, these men are master manipulators. They will go after the intuition. They will cause the woman to second guess herself. And I just want to assure any woman that if you have a man that is suggesting deviant things, or suggesting bringing porn into a relationship, that he's already into porn. He's getting worse and worse. If a man is suggesting deviant things but hasn't brought porn up, I can assure you he's doing porn heavily on the side. That needs to become the focus and the topic of discussion. He is becoming darkened. He needs to be confronted because he's getting worse. And if you do not have your boundaries, then he will take you down that slippery slope with him, and you will be the one to pay the price, because he's getting dark. You aren't. You're trusting, but he's going to take you for a ride, and the end of that will be a tragedy.
And, when my first husband, the one that is now living as a transgender woman, was with me, we went to that one therapist that I mentioned in the first segment, and that therapist was a lesbian and part of the LGBTQ community, an activist even. And after I said, I'm never going back to that therapist, and if you ever go to that therapist again, we are getting divorced, he secretly saw that therapist for 11 more years by himself. And she wrote the letter for him for transition, so that he could go and get hormone therapy from an endocrinologist, in which he began doing and right away. And he took hormones for 11 years, and he would take them not every day, because he would not be able to have erections. And I think that affected his, according to what he wrote to his one person he was having an affair with, that would make him infertile. So I don't know if that's true or not, or just what he said, but so for the couple times we wanted to have children, he didn't take them for a little bit so that we could have sex. So there was a lot of hiding things and a lot of manipulation while he hid that, and it really couldn't be confronted except for the little bit that came to the surface once in a while, a little bit of cross-dressing I find out about, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. The more he fed this beast, the more he wanted, just the more he wanted. So I couldn't counter that which I didn't really know about. It's too bad I didn't know it was bigger, or even know how to address it with him, and to know the source, because I would have wanted to get him the right kind of help. We sought all kinds of help, but none of it was really the right help. And as a wife, I didn't know how to respond. I reacted. I reacted that it was repulsive. I reacted because I was angry and frustrated with it, and I just didn't want it to happen anymore. I didn't ever think maybe there was something in your past that needed to be explored. Maybe sorry that you hurt or feel this way about yourself, but you need some serious help with why you do this and how to stop, because it is. I don't think most people want to end up divorced and having their kids go back and forth. I never would have expected the way he acted towards me But once it came down to when he was decided that this is what he's going to do, I mean, it was a whole different person I was dealing with. It is not, I never would have thought he would hurt me the way he did, that he would have treated me the way he did. While, even as we were going through the divorce, I was continuously shocked by just the way he basically put me out on the curb with the kids like we were trash. We were left homeless, and fortunately my mom and dad did take us in, so we weren't on the streets. But he was having a 6-figure salary and bought himself a new car. I was left with a rundown minivan and no salary, and had to fight in court to get any kind of support from him to take care of his kids and to help me get on my feet, because I didn't have a job. I had stayed home for 10 years with the children by that time. So,
yeah. And Tracy, we had not talked about that, but hopefully this may come as a shock, but it also hopefully will be normalizing that you just described someone who is a psychopath. Now, let me define that and why I say that. Psychopath is not somebody that necessarily is crazy and wielding a knife. A psychopath has morphed through stages of selfishness and gotten to a point where it's not just all about me. He's gone further. It's both all about me, and I'm going to have the last word, the last say, and the last laugh, and I'm going to bring harm upon you. To take a wife and the mother of his kids and his own kids and to put them in a situation where they are homeless, that is as low as it gets.
Right. And we even had what little assets we had, he was willing to burn through them all in a prolonged custody dispute, which he had the help of LGBTQ activist lawyers helping him, who didn't charge him the full rates, and a lot of things were waived for him. And then, while they ran the bill up for me. So in fact, he had even said during that time he didn't care if we went through all of it, if it was all gone.
Tracy, that is the classic statement right there. That's a classic statement of a white-collar psychopath. That for him, it's all about the last word. So as he said, he doesn't care if he goes through all the money. Well, so much for him caring about his kids that he's reached a point where he's completely selfish. So the psychological term, we come in and we give the term psychopath, but when someone has no conscience, okay, you have no conscience if you're going to essentially put your kids, well, if it weren't for your parents, then it sounds like you and your kids would have been on the street. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, my grandparents were around at the time too.
But if they weren't around,
take us in. Yeah.
Okay, so he would have effectively caused his own kids and you, the mother of his kids, to be homeless. That is sadistic.
Right. We had no money when it came back to school time, and I thought I had money because the first payment for child support was ordered. He wrote me a check, and I deposited it. And being a new account, I was by as a single mom, they wanted to wait a couple days before that cleared. It's not like today where I deposit a check and it's available that day. So I had to call him and say, I have no money, and the kids go to school tomorrow. I have no gas in my car, and I just was trying to buy their shoes for school, and I couldn't make the purchase. And he got mad at me and actually made a complaint through the court that I talked about money in front of the kids, which I don't think that I really had a choice because I was in my van out of gas. I guess I could have got out of my car in this darkened parking lot with the kids and said, could you give me a little cash tonight, and I'll pay you back from the child support. But even for asking for help, I was punished when I sincerely needed it. And he just didn't want to leave the fun activity he was at with the new person he was with, which at the time was a female to male transgender that he got together with initially, which was another just, you're as a woman, as a wife, I just felt I guess my self-esteem couldn't have got any lower when I see a woman who looks like Chaz Bono being the replacement for me. And I really was not an unattractive woman, and I just couldn't understand it. I had asked him one time when all of this was going down, well, what if I did this? What if I grew a hairy chest? And what if I, dressed as a man and all these things? And he said, oh, that it wouldn't bother me. I would love you just the same. I just really couldn't understand that. And here he went with this woman who looked like a man and who got its breast cut off and would expose my kids to a number of terrible things, and even threatened to kill my kids, which is why we went through a second. He had to pursue that with his activist lawyers, and that was another $100,000, talking about running through the money. But he acts like he's the victim on all that, and all of the litigation that went on, that I got a really great deal. I got the better end of the stick, he thinks, and he lost his 401k in retirement. What was left of it, I did get most of that because I didn't get any alimony, because when we went to court, he was not working. So he didn't actually get screwed. And if you do the math, he didn't get screwed at all. So,
well, as we begin to wrap things up, what would you say to women who, again, it's an extreme situation, but at the same time, given the fact that there's so much deviant stuff going on, I don't think it's an isolated situation. I think we're talking to women that are right where you were. What can you say to them as far as normalizing the situation for them, so that they know they're not going crazy, so that they know they're actually being manipulated instead?
Well, you need to expect that your husband will respect you, respect your feelings, as long as you're not coming from a place of selfishness. And I don't think it's selfish to expect your husband that you married to act like a man, present like a man, and maintain the intimacy in the marriage. And whenever they dress up as a woman, that does not help the intimacy. Even women who have consented to such a thing have described how this decreases the intimacy in the relationship, changes to where their husbands want to all the time be in the female character while interacting. So don't give in to that. Take care of yourself. You deserve to be treated with respect and love, and to not be lied to. You should be able to trust your husband. But if you're in a place where he's not in an emotionally healthy place, and he's not being a good, honest person with you, then don't trust him. Or maybe it's better to say, this is one of those times, trust but verify. Find out the information. I finally had to ask the Lord to just show me what I needed to know. And within 3 days, all kinds of things were revealed to me that confirmed that he was not repentant, he was not going towards a path of redemption, and he was not working towards reconciliation in our marriage. So recognize that this does hurt you. It is okay to leave. Get someone to talk to that you can confide in. You have to decide where you draw the line. Have an exit plan, because it gets tough when you leave. Expect them to do a little. Not everybody is really nice whenever you're getting a divorce. Not everybody makes it easy and wants an amicable divorce. So plan for things to not go well. Prepare. And I would learn about narcissism and its impact on you, because I had to do that. And once I learned that, I realized how I was continuing to pick narcissists, because I was in a place where I felt that I had to measure up. So I kept trying to measure up because of how bad I felt with my first husband, and with his narcissism, always trying to do something to keep the relationship and to keep him happy. So I would learn about narcissism and its impact on you, or you might end up with another one. So learn about that. Those would be my recommendations. But it's okay to leave. It is okay to leave when you've had enough.
Well put. And prior to us taping, you had said, you can't ask the deceiver for truth. And I can't put it any better, that these men are given over to a depraved mind, meaning a mind that is steeped now in selfishness, and they're never going to be honest.
Right.
Well, Tracy, there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe in a future podcast we will. You've been wonderful with your time, and especially going back into some very dark times for you, some difficult things to talk about, I would imagine still.
Well, praise God that God is so good, and I'm many years past all of this, and I'm doing well. It's been, the kids have been through a lot, and you would never know. You would never know that if you met us, you just would never know we went through all this. God's just been so good to restore what the enemy has taken.
Well, Tracy, thank you. Thank you for being with us, and blessings to you. And we will no doubt be in touch.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Predator Watch, dedicated to shining the light of truth about the nature of the most sophisticated of sexual predators most likely to target places where victims are most easily accessed. For John Euler and the entire team, thanks for listening.
Predator Watch has been sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. As a non-profit organization, Survivor Support is dependent upon the generosity of people who believe in its mission of supporting survivors. Please consider becoming a monthly supporter of this important work.